Okay, and welcome to my third posted video of a Blitz game. If you notice, most of these games are my wins. Eventually, I'll start posting some losses also, but I guess in general, for some reason, I know it's a very, very bad habit. I tend to only save the PGNs of my wins, just because I'm in a better mood after I win the game. In any case, this game, there was a strong king-side attack that I was able to develop over here, and that's why I'm deciding to show it. I was playing the black pieces, e5, e4, that's the regular king pawn opening. I also did e5, regular king pawn opening as well. Kind of a strange second move over here that I think belies the skill of this player. He moved a3. Again, I see this very often on blitz games where people move up the rook pawn to prevent the bishop from going to in this case, b4. I move my bishop out. Again, I figure I usually move my knights out first, but against a non-aggressive opening, I want to try to be a little bit aggressive over there, so I move my bishop out. Again, pretty much transposing a little to what would have happened anyway a little bit later on. He moves his knight out. This is a pretty standard second move. Again, it's almost like I'm white because he blew a move on his a3 pawn. I move my knight to f6. Again, I'm not worried about my pawn, my my e pawn. I mean, it's hanging right now, but if he takes it, then I just simply move my queen to e7, and then he's got to move the knight away. And when he does, I take the e pawn, and I'm in excellent position with three pieces focusing on the middle of the board. If he tries to protect the knight with with c with f4, then I could simply move the queen pawn. I could simply move the e pawn to threaten the knight. So he really can't take that pawn, and he didn't. He protected his e pawn, maybe preparing next move to take the e pawn. So of course I continued with my normal development, moving the knight to c6. Now he expanded on the queen side. I guess that's probably why he initially put his pawn on the A file, on A3 to prepare B4, which he likes to do. Now again, when I move my bishop back to B3, if he kicks the knight out, again this pawn is going to hang a little bit. But that's the kind of thing I wasn't really worried about in general because making even if it was going to cost me a pawn to make his move a knight and make him move his knight a second time when I have my three pieces developed was something that I was perfectly happy to do. I moved my bishop actually to d4, threatening his rook. He moved his pawn up again, consistent with his queenside expansion. I had only one place to move my bishop, and that is, of course, back to b6. He develops his bishop to e2. I protected my pawn finally. Again, I realized that he could kick the knight out any time, and then once he kicks the knight out, this pawn is going to hang. So I played d6. He castles. Now I could have castled at this point also, but I figured, you know what, let's see if I can expand a little bit on the king side. Let's see what happens. So I wanted to develop my last piece. I still wanted to maintain some flexibility. If I'm under harassment at this point in the game, if he has, let's say, a bishop on c4, or if he has the other knight developed, he has bishops over here, then I might castle right away to get my king out of harassment. But in this case, the truth is that he really doesn't have much of a threat. So why castle immediately and cut down on my flexibility? Now he then played b5, kicking my knight out, again expanding on the queen side, which is what he's doing over here. And again, I was perfectly happy with that because I figured I would go for a king side attack by moving my knight into e7. Again, my next move, of course, is knight g6, just to get the two knights and the bishop on that side. Maybe I move my queen to d7. Eventually, I want to try to build up a king side attack over here. He moves his knight to, I'm sorry, his bishop to g5, threatening my knight over here. Now I move my rook pawn up again. At this point I figured I probably wasn't going to be castling kingside. I normally like to castle kingside, but over here with his queen knight still having such poor development over here, and his queenside pawn's not really in position to make much of a run. I figured that eventually I might, move castle queenside. In addition, I figured that I was perfectly fine if his bishop would move back. I was perfectly fine playing g5 and kicking his bishop further back, maybe then moving the knight over here and trapping the bishop into an exchange, which I always like to do. I like to get the two bishops. And so I was perfectly happy to do that. Then he took the knight, figuring that he was going to double my pawns, which I was perfectly happy with because I saw the opportunity over here to launch a kingside attack by playing rook g8. Then he continued to try to bust open the middle with d4. Now I wasn't worried about him taking this pawn because that would allow me to undouble my pawns, so I wasn't worried about that at all. So now I move my queen up because, again, I'm trying for a kingside attack. I realize eventually rook g8 is in the air. I'm going to castle queenside. I'm going to get my other rook involved. I have this bishop which is involved, not so directly right now, but certainly could get into the game very quickly. I have my knight, which eventually is going to come to g6 and is going to probably, this is a good square, I think, for my knight at this point. So I was perfectly happy to allow, my double pawns to stay the way they are. Now he again tries to he threatens my bishop over here. Now, if you notice, my bishop right here has only one move, which is to g4, which is good for me because I want to go to g4 anyway. I want to get my bishop involved. With this move, I think, is a little bit of a mistake on his part. Or I don't know if it's necessarily a big mistake, but over here he significantly weakens his dark squares by taking away this pawn. And remember, if he keeps his pawn over here, if he keeps his pawn on d4, then if I ever take, he can take back with knight, he can take back with the pawn, it's protected by the queen, it's protected by the knight. My dark squared bishop can be hemmed out of the game a little bit. It's not once he vacates this square, then this pawn becomes pinned, my bishop becomes much more powerful on this diagonal. Remember, he has no dark squared bishop, he traded it off for my knight. So based on that, I think it would have been more, if I were playing in his shoes, I would want to make sure that my dark squares are a little stronger to kind of neutralize my dark squared bishop. This way, he really weakens his dark squares and makes my bishop a much more powerful piece. Of course, I have only one move, b4, bishop b4. Not really pinning the knight necessarily, but I really didn't have much of a choice. Now, he played knight a4. Now, clearly he was, he didn't like the fact that I had a light squared bishop that was, that was deep in his territory, and he kind of forced me to trade it off. There's really no other choice that I have. Of course, it's being protected by the queen, but he's got two pieces attacking it. I could defend it with the rook and keep it, but eventually he can kick it out with a move like a3, or even c3, and at this point I realized I was perfectly okay trading off the light squared bishops because I didn't really see how the light squared bishop was going to contribute to the attack that much. I mean, his light squares are pretty strong in the middle. He has the two pawns on e4 and d5. The pawns around his king don't really have any weaknesses right here, so I was happy to trade off the light squared bishops, which I did. Then I castled long. No, really, that's really the only way at this point to continue the attack. I want to make sure I have the two rooks involved. Now he continues to consolidate on the queen side, playing c4, and again, that his light squares are very strong over here, but the problem with that is I don't have a light squared bishop anyway. So the fact that he has strong light squares is not really going to, if it came to an endgame, it would help him a lot. But my black bishop wouldn't be very good against all these pawns. It would be a very weak bishop. It would be a very bad bishop in the endgame. But I'm not playing for the endgame right now. I'm playing for the attack. So now I moved my bishop to a very strong outpost over here on d4, not only threatening the rook, so the fact that it's threatening the rook is nice because it does it with tempo. It means I don't really waste a move putting my bishop on this strong central square. Again, this is a square that it really can't be kicked out of very easily. I suppose it can be kicked out with knight f3 or knight f5, but, knight f5 I just traded off, so knight f3 I suppose it could. But at this point he can't do anything. He's got to defend his rook, so he moves his rook to a2. Now, of course, I move my rook to b3, which I'm sorry, to to g8, which I was planning to do for a long time to put much more pressure on his king. Now he's got two pinned pawns, one on